Chapter 2.2 Painting, Video Part 4. We're going to start here with Ingres. It's Ingres, Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres. That's how we would say it. Ingres, there's a little more accent in there. We're looking at a Grisaille, his famous Odalisque painting. He had this sort of copy made. He made multiples of this. But anyway, this was for his students to see what underpainting looked like. So underpainting is what happens to the canvas before the colors go on, if that makes sense. And what he's trying to show here are the values, and that's how he achieves these different values once the color is put on top of it. So there's this layering effect, and there's some depth, and he's able to achieve different values. If he were just to put one whole color over this whole thing, we'd get a sense of the values coming through, if that makes sense. That's not exactly what happens, but we want to think about this as a black and white background or underpainting. Here's the final work, a little different. You can see the changes that happened, but that original one we just looked at was for students. And then as he starts to put color in and over, he's got the dark darks already established and the lighter lights and so on. Rosa Bonheur, The Horse Fair, is our next example. So some beautiful dramatic contrasts in here and lots of motion and energy. She's painting outdoors. At this point, we're looking at 1852 to 55, oil on canvas, very large, 16 feet wide, 8 feet high. And the innovation or the point here is that paint is now available in tubes or in this case, a pig bladder, but they're portable. You no longer are limited to the studio where you need to paint. You can be out of doors. So she takes this to quite a degree here, capturing this scene at a horse fair. And she's exploiting the energetic quality of the oil paint and has all these really interesting rhythms going on. But it's able to be quick and energetic, and it's outdoors and things are happening, and she's capturing that with oil paint that is transportable. This case, what we're looking at here for Joan Brown, Girl in a Chair, we're looking at impasto, and I said I would mention this, and it's very hard to understand this concept looking at a book and not looking at the actual work because you can't see the three-dimensionality of these chunks of paint. So blobs or chunks or thick areas of paint are built up to create a three-dimensional effect. This is not becoming a three-dimensional work, but it gives it a three-dimensional effect. This started much further back, hundreds of years prior, where they really were like building up something like a nose, which would actually project forward in the sense that that's, a three-dimensional part of the body that's coming off of the face. So that's where the impasto would be, but in this case it's a bit more abstract, and there's just impasto and thick paint throughout. Hung Lu, this is a beautiful piece, Interregnum, and it's combining different stylistic imagery, traditional Chinese imagery here, and then we get into the musculature and the dimensionality of the figures that implied dimension with chiaroscuro, with that modeling with light and dark, and that's a much more Western style. She's somebody who moved from China to the US, so she's combining these two styles to create some drama. This is an oil paint, and she's really got some rich colors happening here, and you can just see the beautiful colors that she's developed, and I guess that's it. She does use oil paint to achieve her own unique style. So Gentileschi, Artemisia Gentileschi, Judith Decapitating Holofernes, she did a couple versions of this, and it really had a lot of power. I'll talk a little bit about subject and content here for a minute, because she was a woman painting in a man's world, And this is a powerful biblical image of a woman that subdues and kills a man. So that was kind of powerful for her. But where it's important in this chapter for media and paint is that she's really developing that sense of light and shadow and her mastery of the material. And you can see every fold and wrinkle in the sheets. You see the expression on the face, the blood, everything about this painting is masterfully done, and that sense of light source here, this focal point, um, and the dramatic contrast, and that those arms become very three-dimensional. Caravaggio is our official master of the Renaissance, or post-Renaissance in the Baroque of chiaroscuro, and she studies him closely and also becomes a master of this form. That's a close-up. This realistic, my mouse isn't working, realistic chain and mask here is showing her mastery, and that artist, that's her message here. Artists are masters of illusion, and that she is at that level. So she was recognized to some degree, but her situation was very difficult, and she did manage to become successful. Ink painting, it's mostly on paper. Now this gets really confusing because we talk about wet media in chapter 2.1, and those inks are slightly different. I don't know, because we're going to get into mixed media in the next video. I don't know how officially people watch which ink they're using for these different drawings versus paintings, but in the case of looking at this particular piece from China, Guoqi, the early spring, this would be an ink painting with gouache or with gum arabic added into it. Okay, so gum arabic is our binder. Remember all these different media that we're looking at in terms of oil painting versus ink and acrylic. All of these have the same pigments, but they have different binders, or they have different uh, materials, okay, that make them float on the paper or stick to the paper. So watercolor and gouache, same thing, same pigments, but different material. So again, gum arabic for both of these. The only difference with gouache between these two, watercolor is transparent, gouache is opaque, means you can't see through it. And in that case, chalk is added and it makes it opaque. So these are the same thing, only gouache has chalk added to it. We're looking at John Singer Sargent's Mountain Stream. The white areas in this painting are the paper. Typically in watercolor, you work backward in terms of the negative space or the untouched areas. You sort of draw those out, and then the darkest values, the shadows behind these rocks and so on, those are the last things that are built up. So one wash of like a light blue might happen, and then a darker blue over that. You can kind of see that happening right here. So the pigment and the color is built up. The white areas are left bare. You can see a little bit of the pencil lines, I think, on the figure is the best place to see it, in a few of the rocks. But you're going to leave the white space open. Occasionally, and we're going to look at another case here with Albrecht Dürer, a young hare. In this case, it says gouache that's listed here. This is a very small little piece, 9 by 8 inches. The white, he went back in to highlight some of these areas, and perhaps the eye, that's the most common, somewhere on a very dark surface. Gouache would be used with that chalky white suspension, so it would go back and bring white back to a dark area. Or mistakes, often artists will go back and use gouache to touch up a watercolor to correct some mistakes. Another example is Sonia Delaunay, and we don't get a very close-up view of this, but this is kind of more typical of what we think of the color quality, the translucency of a watercolor.